You steal a loaf of bread beside the Nile. A neighbor sees you. By sunset, you may be standing before local officials. There is no police station. There is no modern criminal code. There is no lawyer waiting beside you. But ancient Egypt still has rules, and breaking them can become terrifying very quickly. To understand punishment, forget the word crime for a moment. Ancient Egyptians thought in terms of order. They called that order ma'at. Ma'at meant truth, balance, justice, and proper behavior. The king was expected to protect it. Officials were expected to enforce it. Ordinary people were expected to live inside it. So breaking the law was more than annoying the state. It could be treated as disturbing the proper order of society. But ancient Egyptian law was not one single book. No complete Egyptian law code survives. Rules came from royal decrees, custom, contracts, court practice, and administration. The system also changed across more than 3,000 years. A village dispute in the New Kingdom was not identical to a royal conspiracy. A stolen donkey was not treated like tomb robbery. Status mattered, evidence mattered, and the identity of the victim could matter enormously. Suppose your problem was ordinary. Maybe you owed grain. Maybe you damaged a neighbor's property. Maybe someone accused you of stealing tools. Your first encounter might be local. Communities used councils often called kenbet by modern scholars. At places such as Deir, el-Medina, these councils heard disputes between workers and families. The judges were not robed professionals in the modern sense. They could be local officials, senior workmen, scribes, or community leaders. People brought complaints. Witnesses spoke. Documents were read. Oaths could be demanded. The goal was to decide whose story should be believed. Imagine standing there while a scribe records every accusation. The papyrus itself becomes dangerous. Your words can outlive the argument. Ancient Egyptian legal records show people accusing neighbors of theft, assault, unpaid debts, and property disputes. Some cases sound surprisingly familiar. Someone borrowed something. Someone refused to return it. Someone claimed an inheritance. Someone said a witness was lying. Human conflict has changed less than the buildings around it. What happened if the court thought you were guilty? For a minor dispute, punishment could be practical. You might have to return stolen property. You might repay more than you took. You might surrender goods. You might lose a claim. You might be ordered to complete an obligation. In administrative cases, rations or wages could matter. The point was often to restore order rather than create a dramatic spectacle, but move into serious crime, and the atmosphere changes. The state could use physical punishment. Beatings appear repeatedly in Egyptian records. Officials could order blows with sticks. Interrogation itself could become violent. A confession extracted under beating appears in some surviving cases. That means the question, "Did you do it?" was not always asked gently. In some records, suspects and witnesses were beaten while officials tried to establish facts. The process could punish you before the final judgment even arrived. Now imagine being accused of theft from a royal tomb. This was not ordinary stealing. A royal tomb was sacred, wealthy, and politically important. During the late New Kingdom, tomb robbery became a major crisis. The Abbott Papyrus Records investigations during the reign of Ramesses IX. Inspectors examined royal and private tombs around Thebes. Some were intact, others had been broken open. The records read like an ancient crime investigation. Officials inspected doors, they checked burial chambers, they questioned suspects, they compared testimony. An accusation spread through networks of workers and thieves. The Great Tomb Robbery papyri preserve even darker details. Suspects described entering tombs and stripping valuable metals from burials. Gold, silver, bronze, cloth, and precious objects could be divided among accomplices. The dead had been prepared for eternity. Thieves converted eternity into loot. Why was this treated so severely? Because tomb robbery attacked several layers of Egyptian order at once. It was theft. It violated sacred space. It dishonored the dead. And when the tomb belonged to royalty, it touched the king himself. Punishments in these cases could include beatings, imprisonment, forced labor, mutilation, or death, depending on period and circumstances. The surviving evidence is uneven, but the message is clear. Some offenses placed your body directly in the hands of the state. Mutilation sounds extreme because it was. Egyptian sources describe punishments such as cutting off noses or ears in certain contexts. One notorious place name from the New Kingdom is often translated as Rhino Kalura, associated in later traditions with people whose noses had been cut. Scholars debate details and chronology, but Egyptian texts do show bodily mutilation as a real punitive possibility. A punishment could mark you permanently. Everyone who saw your face could see that something had happened. There was another punishment that could be worse than pain: forced labor. Egypt had mines, quarries, agricultural estates, temples, and state projects. Convicted people or captives could be assigned to harsh labor. Being sent away could separate you from family, community, and property. In desert mining regions, heat and exhaustion could become part of the sentence. The punishment did not need a prison cell. Your workplace could become the prison. And yes, ancient Egypt had confinement. But prisons did not operate exactly like modern long-term penitentiaries. Detention could hold suspects during investigation. People might be confined while officials decided a case. Work camps and institutional custody also existed. The modern idea of serving a neat number of years behind bars does not map perfectly onto most pharaonic evidence. Egyptian punishment was often more immediate: repay, lose property, be beaten, be sent away, be marked, or for the most dangerous crimes, die. What could get you killed? Treason was an obvious candidate. So was conspiracy against the king. One of the most famous cases comes from the end of Ramesses III's reign. The judicial papyrus of Turin records the so-called harem conspiracy. Members of the royal household were accused of plotting against the king. Officials investigated a network involving court figures, women of the harem, and others. Special judges were appointed. Some defendants were condemned. The texts sometimes avoid plainly saying execution. Instead, they use formulas indicating that condemned men were allowed or compelled to take their own lives. The language is bureaucratic. The outcome was not. The same case also shows something uncomfortable. Even judges could become defendants. Several officials appointed to investigate the conspiracy were themselves accused of improper behavior with women connected to the case. Some were punished by mutilation. The people judging the law could suddenly fall beneath it. In a royal crisis, nobody near the conspiracy was completely safe. Could an ordinary person appeal? Sometimes disputes moved between authorities. The vizier was one of Egypt's highest officials and had major judicial responsibilities. The instruction of Rekhmir describes ideals for a vizier hearing petitioners fairly. He was told not to favor the powerful over the weak. Whether reality always matched that ideal is another question. But the ideal mattered. Egyptians understood that justice could fail if officials became corrupt. That fear appears vividly in literature. The tale of the eloquent peasant describes a man repeatedly demanding justice after being robbed. His speeches praise fairness and condemn corrupt authority. It is not a courtroom transcript, it is literature, but it shows what Egyptians wanted justice to sound like. The weak person should be heard. The official should not twist the balance. Ma'at was an aspiration precisely because real life could fall short of it. So, what counted as evidence? Witness testimony mattered. Written records mattered. Possession mattered. Confessions mattered. Oaths could matter. In some periods, divine oracles could even be consulted in legal decisions. A god's portable shrine might be asked a yes or no question. Movement of the shrine could be interpreted as the divine answer. To a modern courtroom, that sounds impossible. To an Egyptian community, divine authority and social order were deeply connected. But witnesses could lie, officials could pressure suspects, documents could conflict, people could accuse enemies, and torture or beating could produce the answer an interrogator wanted. Ancient Egyptian justice was not a clean machine. It was a human institution. That means it contained judgment, fear, hierarchy, and error. Class also shaped risk. A poor worker and a powerful official did not enter every conflict with equal resources, yet surviving records from worker communities show ordinary people suing, testifying, complaining, and sometimes winning claims. Women could own property, make contracts, inherit, and appear in legal disputes. That does not mean equality in the modern sense. It means the system was more complicated than a simple pyramid where nobody below the elite had a voice. Family disputes could become legal disputes too. Marriage arrangements, property, inheritance, and household goods created conflict. Egyptian women had unusually strong property rights compared with many later societies. A woman could bring claims involving her own possessions. If someone took property that legally belonged to her, family status did not automatically erase the dispute. Law reached directly into the household. What about assault? Violence between people could be reported. Records from Deir el-Medina preserve accusations of beatings and threats, but punishment depended heavily on context and evidence. There was no single surviving chart saying one punch equals one fixed sentence. Officials judged cases within social and administrative systems. That flexibility could help. It could also make outcomes unpredictable. Now imagine something even more frightening. You are innocent. Someone names you during an interrogation. Officials summon you. Your neighbors watch. A scribe writes your name. You swear you know nothing. Then the questioning becomes physical. This is where ancient justice feels most distant from ours. The presumption of innocence was not protected by modern constitutional rules. Procedure varied, power mattered, and the search for confession could become brutal. Still, officials cared about contradictions. Tomb robbery investigations sometimes compared testimony and re-questioned suspects. Inspection teams physically checked locations. Lists were made. Names were recorded. Egyptian bureaucracy could be relentless. The same civilization that counted grain could count accusations. That bureaucracy created another punishment: reputation. If your community knew you as a thief, liar, or violent person, punishment did not end when officials stopped asking questions. Ancient villages depended on cooperation. People shared work crews, water, food networks, family connections, and religious life. Being distrusted could damage your future. A legal defeat could become a social sentence, and religion made the problem larger. Egyptians believed judgment did not end at death. In funerary texts, the dead hoped to pass judgment before Osiris. The famous negative confessions deny acts such as stealing, killing, lying, and wrongdoing. The heart was imagined being weighed against the feather of Ma'at. This was not the same as a state trial, but earthly morality and cosmic judgment echoed one another. You could escape an official. Escaping the next world was harder. That connection explains something important. Egyptian law was not simply about punishment. It was about restoring a world that was supposed to remain balanced. A thief disrupted ownership. A corrupt official disrupted trust. A tomb robber disrupted sacred order. A conspirator disrupted kingship. The response became harsher as the perceived damage grew. So what happened if you broke the law in ancient Egypt? There was no single answer. You might repay what you owed. You might lose property. You might be beaten. You might be detained. You might be sent to forced labor. You might be mutilated. You might die. Or you might convince the court that the accusation was false. Your fate depended on the offense. The period, the evidence, your status, the officials, and sometimes the politics surrounding your case. That may be the most unsettling part. Ancient Egyptian justice was organized. It had scribes, hearings, testimony, inspections, judges, and appeals. It could look surprisingly familiar from a distance. Then you move closer. The sticks appear. The forced confessions appear. The mutilations appear. The king's authority appears. And the familiar courtroom becomes something much older. 3,000 years later, the papyri still preserve those voices. Accusers, defendants, witnesses, judges, workers, thieves, people insisting they were innocent, people admitting exactly what they stole. The pyramids make ancient Egypt look timeless. Its court records do the opposite. They make it painfully human, because behind every law was the same question we still ask: who should be believed, who deserves punishment, and who gets to decide? Ancient Egypt built monuments for eternity, but justice was decided by living people, and living people have never been perfectly balanced.